Hi, this is Welcome to Self, caring for the human in the therapist's chair, and I'm your host, Dr. Hayley D. Quinn, fellow human, clinical psychologist, supervisor and trainer. Welcome to Self is a place where you can come and learn ways to elevate your own care and compassion, a place to rest and be soothed, a place to remember that you are human first and choose the helping profession as just one of the roles in your life. My aim is that this is a place of soothing, comfort, nourishment and nurture. A place where you can also welcome yourself. Hi, and welcome to another episode. I'd like to take a moment of gratitude for Maggie, who left me a comment. Maggie said, "Your podcasts are truly inspiring. I enjoy sitting, reflecting, and taking notes of the informative ways you and your guest speakers explore ideas and share honest reflections about the difficulties they have experienced taking care of themselves at times." Thanks, Maggie, for your lovely feedback. I really do appreciate it, and I'm so pleased that the podcast is making a difference for you. Before we get into this episode, I'd just like to remind you of the CFT for Trauma training I will be running at the beautiful Sunshine Coast in November with my colleague Dr. Lisa McLean. You can find the link in the show notes or reach out via my website. I'm thrilled to introduce my next guest, Amanda Connell from Spilt Milk Psychology. Amanda is a clinical psychologist working at the intersection of infant feeding, mental health, and early parenting. For too long, discussions around parental mental health have pitted parents against children in the battle for happiness. Amanda passionately believes there is enough love for everyone. She champions finding solutions that honour the needs of both parents and babies, bringing fierce compassion to perinatal mental health. Her human-centred approach empowers families by providing insightful, practical, and relatable information and support. I have the pleasure of knowing Amanda personally, and she's such a fountain of knowledge in this area. She has such a beautifully compassionate approach, and I'm thrilled to have her on the podcast today. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed my conversation with Amanda. Hey, Amanda. It's so lovely to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. It's really nice to have another local Brisbane psychologist on the pod.
Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No worries. So do you want to start with just telling us a little bit about yourself and what it was that drew you to the helping professions?
So my name is Amanda. I'm a Brisbane-based clinical psychologist and have a practice called Spilt Milk Psychology. At the moment, I work largely in the perinatal space, so supporting mums and bubs and families through the transition to parenthood and early parenting and the mental health challenges that can come through that. My pathway to psychology, I don't even know if you know this, Hayley, was quite varied. I actually did a Bachelor of Mathematics before I did. So I studied pure mathematics before I did psychology.
Oh, wow.
And then got to the end of that degree and was counting down to graduation and then realized, oh, when I finish this, that's not the end. Then I have to actually start doing it for a living and freaked out, panicked, and transferred to psychology when I stopped and looked at what were the things that I actually enjoyed doing in my life. And so I actually went into evolutionary psychology and worked with primates for a while. And I think that's one of the things that drew me just into what makes us human and what is our humanness and what are the things that are unique to us as humans, but also connecting in not just to our common humanity, but our common being with other beings on our planet, and our nearest relatives in particular are of great interest to me. And I think that's also why I got interested in perinatal psychology, and particularly what drew me to CFT as well is the really strong connection to the fact that as humans we are animals, we are primates, we we have bodies. Like we often kind of treat ourselves as consciousness moving around in a life support system.
Yeah.
But I love how evolutionary psychology and CFT and these spaces help connect us to the fact that we aren't just brains in bodies, that we're beings and that we
Yeah.
fit together, and our brain influences our body and is influenced by our body. Um, and the perinatal space is a space of huge transitions psychologically, emotionally, relationally, um, but also physically. Like we have these big body changes that go on through this. So it's all of the transitions that come into parenting where there's so much change
Yeah.
in our physical being as well as our psychological being as well.
Yeah. So, like so many of us, you didn't go straight into psychology. You kind of took the longer way round to get here, which I think can be more interesting at times.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things. Is at the time I really felt like quite judgmental towards myself, like I'd wasted all this time studying pure mathematics. And I'm like, oh, such a waste, because I did um, my major in my maths degree was operations and logistics. So looking at optimization and those sorts of things. And I'll tell you what, as a parent, it's probably a really useful skill to have that idea of optimizing rather than perfecting, of recognizing we have limited resources and you can't actually just have 100% of everything. You
Yeah.
can't do that.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also one of the things that strikes me a lot, because I think still quite mathematically. My mind often thinks in numbers and patterns and those sorts of things too, is how often I find myself like saying to people, it's like, you do know like half the time you're below average because that's how averages work. Like,
Yeah.
half of the time you're below average. You can't aim to be above average most of the time. Like, that's mathematically impossible. Um,
That's
yeah,
fantastic.
yes,
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Whatever we learn is never wasted, whatever
yeah.
it is. It's always going to be helpful in some way, even if that's, I don't want to do that anymore.
It's also one of those things that was really interesting for me in my training, was going from maths to psychology. And maths is a very male dominated
Yeah.
field, especially pure mathematics that I was doing. And then moving to psychology, which is quite female dominated. And I remember going to my first couple of psychology lectures and being like, this sounds different. Like the lecture theaters sound, the space is such a different space. And realizing even just right down to the like acoustics of
Yeah.
when you walk into a room full of men, it sounds like, and then you walk into a room full of women, it's like, there's a different pitch to the room.
Yeah.
And seeing that influence, I think, of the world we find ourselves in as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned you work within the perinatal field. Can you tell us how you came to be passionate about that? You've sort of touched on that sort of evolutionary psychology. What are some of the highlights and challenges that you face in your work? Because I imagine that could be quite a challenging area.
yeah, it is, and it's one of those spaces. I've always been really interested in women's health as well, and I don't know if that was again coming from a very male dominated um, space into a very female dominated space, and recognizing the role of feminism and feminist psychology and those
Yeah.
sorts of things. So I was women's officer at the university where I studied at ANU when I was there, and really got involved in looking at feminist discourse analysis and the impact of um, the patriarchy and the medical model of being so strongly influenced by men.
Mm,
And then even moving through the evolutionary psychology stuff, always in back of mind was women's experiences and how they differ
yeah.
in psychology and in accessing psychology services. And then through the transition of having my own children, of realizing and entering the motherhood space and being and hearing the experiences of other women around me. And when I became a mother, I joined the Australian Breastfeeding Association for support for myself, and then used that time to train as a breastfeeding counsellor and worked as a volunteer breastfeeding counsellor for the Australian Breastfeeding Association for 7+ years.
Wow.
And during that time, as well, it sort of brings to the fore how universal these challenges are for so many families and how complicated all of these transitions are. And it just really sparked a fire in me, I think, to improve the quality of care that women receive and families receive.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a really big part that plays into the perinatal space. Is unlike a lot of other areas of psychology, where we do recognize the role of relationships and social and psychosocial events. In the perinatal space, there is still um, the medicalized model that individuates the distress that women feel when they become
Yeah.
a mother and put it on her.
Yeah.
We're recognizing that actually a lot of the challenges that a woman faces in the perinatal space isn't just from becoming a mother. It's the impact that has on her intimate relationships, the impact it has on her identity, the huge
Yeah.
identity shift that comes. And that when you work in the perinatal space, there's a Winnicott who is kind of the father of attachment theory and things,
Yeah.
sort of talks about that, there's no such thing as a baby. There's a baby in someone.
Yes.
Because, you know, as I said, we're fancy monkeys, and a lone monkey is a dead monkey, especially
Yeah.
a baby one. We rely, we're social beings. And the very first need that we have, the need that we are born with, is to be loved, is to be cared for, because without that, we don't survive. We
Yeah.
can't. We are dependent. And so the first need that we have is to be cared for.
Yeah.
It's such a strong primal need, and that need doesn't go away. And in the same way that Winnicott says there's no such thing as a baby, there's a baby in someone, there's no such thing as a mother.
Mm.
There's a mother and someone, because without the context of her baby, she's not a mother. She's a woman, she's a person. And there's no such thing as a parent. There's a parent and someone. It's the same for dads. A dad's identity doesn't exist outside of the context of a baby.
Yeah.
And so it means that working in the perinatal space more acutely than in other areas of psychology, you are always having to work relationally, dyadically, triadically, family systems. You're always having to hold in mind the other parties. So
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest challenge, I think.
Yeah. And I think, it's beautiful work you do, because I think, as you touched on before, that there's a lot of, or has been, and probably still is, a lot of blaming and shaming of women when they struggle, when they transition into motherhood. So I think
Yeah.
this is really important work. You mentioned you were drawn to compassion-focused therapy. How has your training in CFT changed how you work? And also, what impact has that had on you personally?
Huge, really huge. And I think it is, it's one of those things. I love CFT and all the modalities in the compassion space around things. I love working with flows of compassion, I think, and expectation management and things. But again, in the perinatal space, I think we have cultures that frame mothers as compassionate, but often the only flow of compassion that they're looking at is the flow from self to other,
Yeah.
of how a mother cares for others. And there's not as much consideration given for the receiving of compassion,
Yeah.
which often in the perinatal space contributes more to distress than anything else. Is that, especially for high achieving, independent, capable um, women, as they transition into motherhood and suddenly have, as I said, that need to be cared for, and the touching right to the bone of that primal need to belong, to be accepted,
Yeah.
to be judged as capable, and to be supported through their suffering. And we again have a culture of motherhood meant to be this time of bliss and wonderment and the most rewarding job you've ever done. Um, and the expectations on women to be loving every moment, or what does it mean about me
Yeah.
if this is actually a time of great pain or of great personal suffering and struggle,
Yeah.
that women often feel like they're failing in that space.
Yeah.
And they set the bar so high, like I said, that and even when they try not to, like even like the framing of what a reasonable expectation sounds like, when a mother says to me something like, I know I'm not going to be perfect, I just want to be the best mom I can be.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going, no, that's actually impossible. You can't be at your best all of the time.
No.
You can't even be at your average half of
Yeah,
the time. You're going to
exactly.
be below that. So again, that idea of, if you're
Yeah.
constantly aiming for your optimal performance, then the vast majority of the time you're going to feel like you're failing.
Yeah.
If your
Gosh, it's
goal is to do your best.
yeah, it's such an important point, isn't it? It's like setting the bar when we think we're actually not setting it that high, but
Mm,
the bar is actually still being set really high.
yes, yeah,
And then this continual, and then so much judgment from society and
mm.
what have you, isn't it, around parenting as well. So
And
there's
also the
this,
qualities of what makes a good mother, and
yeah,
particularly for women who've had experiences of mental health concerns in the past.
yeah,
Like we think of some of these implicit cultural ideas of like that a mother is supposed to be organized. Mothers are meant to have excellent executive functioning. And
yeah,
if you're someone with ADHD, that's going to be something you struggle with automatically. Or that mothers are meant to be um, really well regulated all of the time.
yeah,
And that when we think of what are the qualities of a mother, is we think of someone who is um, calm and serene and grounded, and these qualities that for a lot of people do not come naturally, or
yeah,
are not skills that they may have been um, taught or had modeled to them or have experienced in their own childhoods.
yeah,
Um, and so it's very easy for them to experience huge levels of shame,
yeah,
and particularly around certain emotional expression. Again, we almost actually I like normalize anxious mothers.
yeah,
You're meant to worry about your baby. Good mothers worry about their baby. Um, we feel pity towards sad mothers. We will comfort a depressed mother. But if you're an angry mum,
mm,
if you're a mum who dysregulates or who experiences strong anger, angry mums are seen as crazy mums. Angry mums are seen as dangerous mums.
yeah,
Where actually anger in the perinatal period is an incredibly common and actually also valuable um, emotion, and yet it's one that gets demonized and suppressed
yeah,
and separated out. So they're probably the biggest things where I think compassion focused therapy has had such a powerful influence in the way that I practice in helping the de-shaming, and so much work constantly in that space of de-shaming and helping people to understand how so many of the things that we do are actually functional but in dysfunctional amounts.
yeah,
So like anger in the perinatal space is actually a really functional emotion, but it might be presenting in a dysfunctional or a maladaptive way.
yeah,
So
yeah.
being able to de-shame that, and CFT has such beautiful tools for that.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. Such important work. And how has CFT kind of helped you? Because I mean, you're a mum, you're recently a solo parent,
mm.
you're a working mum,
Yeah,
you're a therapist working with mums, you've got
yeah.
lots of roles going on. So how has that helped you as well? Because I know I've talked a lot about how CFT has been life changing for me in how I relate to myself and not just professionally but personally how it's impacted my life. I'm curious how what have you taken from it personally?
Oh, yeah, it's huge, and it is one of those things of I think CFT really encouraged me to be able to step really authentically into my work,
Yeah,
and to allow myself, again, with those flows of compassion, like so many other mums, this flow of compassion that I struggled with probably the most was compassion from others to
yeah,
self,
yeah.
and allowing that space. So, yeah, over the last 2 years, I separated from my husband in 2020. And then in the process actually of moving out of the marital home, when moving furniture, I injured my spine.
Mm,
Again, I have a history of spinal issues and had to take an unplanned, very um, chaotic break from clinical work, and had to manage triaging my clients out while I took a break, to have spinal surgery, rebuild and navigating that again as a single parent
yeah,
through through those challenges of care arrangements and shifting things around. And we do have all of the triggers, that inner critic and those fears around what's this going to mean and what other people are going to think, and actually holding and allowing space for um, appropriate compassion from others, of saying,
yeah,
actually, it's all right for me to need to step back. It's all right for me to need to breathe for myself,
yeah,
before I can breathe for others. And CFT, I think, really gave me the skills to honor what I needed through that time, and also gave me the skills I think that I needed professionally at that time to be able to continue to hold space for others while holding space for myself,
Yeah.
that I could show up for my clients and still honor and make space for my own needs, both in the immediacy of being in session, but also outside of session of giving myself that space to process.
Yeah.
But I think the tools that come from working from that compassionate framework of, and again, the biggest one for me has been that lowering the bar. I go, oh, I thought the bar was low. It needs to be lower, lower, lower. Get under the bed, like, put the bar
Yeah.
away, like just. And so often, as we often find, in working in a space that's at a life stage where you're in a similar life stage, is that oftentimes you're speaking to your clients, but you're also speaking to yourself.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I talk to parents about, is so often what we need to do is to say what we need to hear. And that
Yeah.
by honoring the needs of the other, we also honor the needs of the self. Like when my kids are, um, frantic and stressed and chaotic, is being able to just say, it's okay, take your time. It's all right,
Yeah.
take your time. Or you didn't want it to be like this. I know you didn't want today to be like this. Is to
Uh,
know that I'm talking to me as much as I'm talking to them.
Yeah.
It's like, I know you're sad that mommy was running late today. You wished that I could be here on time. I wanted that too.
Yeah.
Um, and to really be able to tune into that and go, the same validation I can offer them, I can offer myself.
Wow.
And both, and again, with clients and with your own children. And so much perinatal work involves a lot of reparenting of your clients as well. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of those skills where you're um, constantly in a state of learning and growing.
Yeah. Yeah. And self-reflection, isn't it? It's that, keeping an eye on yourself and an eye on your client, or like you say, an eye on your child and an eye on yourself,
Mm,
and working with that. So you have recently made changes to your work life. So
mhm.
you've had some big upheavals in the last couple of years, but you've recently made changes to your work life, and you've set up on your own private practice, having been in a group private practice. And I think, that can be challenging on different levels and very exciting as well. I wonder if you could talk about how you navigated those changes and what you found most helpful.
Yeah. So as you said, I've had my own business, Spilt Milk Psychology, has been around for about 6 years or so, through which I provide health professional training and supervision.
Yeah.
But for my clinical work, I've always done that as a subcontractor through a group private practice. And with the changes that came with navigating the shift to single parenting, I needed to have the flexibility of being able to work school hours and work from home,
Mm.
and manage my own diary with a bit more flexibility than what being in a big practice allowed for. So I made the decision to shift over and just start seeing clients via telehealth,
Yeah.
through Spilt Milk. And so it's one of those weird spaces in that I've been in private practice for years, and
Yeah.
yet I'm just starting a private practice. So I've got this kind of weird um, space of being an experienced beginner.
Yeah.
So it's and it definitely is that the challenges that come with that is that sense of feeling like I should know what I'm doing. Like, why do I not know what I'm doing? Why is this all so hard? And then having to stop and go, oh, it's because this is actually a new business. This is
Yeah.
actually a new venture. And you don't get to skip that part that you're always going to be a beginner when you're at the beginning of something.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that the mindset that's been really helpful for me during all this time, like as I'm watching my bank balance slide downwards as I, transition through having fewer clients while I set things up, and allowing myself the space to do that, because I
Yeah.
think it is that sense of urgency that can come, and having to kind of comfort myself through that idea of going, I'm not running away, I'm not falling behind, I'm taking a run up.
Yeah.
When you take a run up for something, you have to go backwards first in order to
Yeah.
get that momentum to really be able to come at something well.
Yeah.
um, and that's probably again been a big gift that's come from having the CFT training, is allowing myself to underperform for a bit,
Yeah.
and really recognize that's actually a part of the ebbs and flows and the seasons of life that
Yeah.
in our capitalist kind of world that we live in, we have this idea of being in perpetual summer and that we're meant to be harvesting at all times. And it's like, that's not how
No. It's not
the world
reality, is it?
works. It's not reality that we
No.
need to have and so I remind myself of some of those things and workshops that I've run that I've called, cultivating compassion and drawing on that idea of
Yeah.
anything when you first plant a seed for a long time, you water dirt, there's
Yeah.
nothing to be
Nothing
there's
to
nothing to
see.
be seen, that you're just watering dirt. And I think that comes with like skill rehearsal and things like that
Yeah.
too, in a clinical sense. But it's the same with starting any venture, is holding that struggle, holding that fear of, oh God, what if I'm just watering dirt? What if this is a dud? Like, what if this isn't going to go anywhere? What if it's not going to bear enough fruit, even if it bears fruit? What if it's not going to be enough? And what if it's
Yeah.
not going to grow quickly enough? And it's like having to hold that struggle of saying, it's okay, just water the dirt. Like, just that's all you can
Yeah.
do for now. That's where you are. And we're cultivating, we're preparing the ground, we're creating the conditions, and all of those skills, I think, and that language has really come from my CFT training to be able to hold that space
Yeah. I think
for
when we
me.
can reflect on our own 3 circles and
Mm.
sort of see, is this threat-based drive? Am I thinking, "Oh, I just need to book more clients in. I just need to
Yeah.
it doesn't matter who they are, I just need to book them in so I can
Get
build
'em
my
in, yeah.
business," is not a
Yeah.
helpful thing, isn't it? But when we can notice it's actually my drive system is being motivated by threat here,
Mm.
this is time to sit back and reflect and think, "No, actually, it is okay to just be watering the dirt. I
Yeah.
don't need to trying to put more seeds in."
Yeah. Yeah, and that I don't need to be trying to harvest anything right
Yeah.
now, that actually it's all right to give yourself time to get prepared,
Yeah.
and that green circle space of stay and play, let
Yeah.
yourself dream and think,
Yeah.
and create a world that's sustainable for me
Yeah.
moving forwards,
Yeah.
especially through that not wanting to overwork. I've overworked for years,
Yeah.
just to kind of keep my head above water.
Yeah.
And so um, creating that work-life balance and going
Yeah.
like, oh, this is productive. It's just I'm cultivating
Yeah.
rather than harvesting, and that's a different form of productivity.
Yeah, and it can be hard, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think lots of us struggle with that. I know when I had to give up what I was doing because of my health and I was setting out on my own
Mm,
and I started off just with a handful of clients and it was
mm,
this thing of like, but what if this doesn't work? And
mm.
what if, what will I do? And being in that space and being willing to be with the discomfort that shows up can be really challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's that thing too, isn't it? Is one of the skills, I think, from being able to, when we can access our that kind of compassionate mindset, is
Yeah.
it's often so much more flexible. And
Yes.
it's the biggest thing that I notice compared to if you are in that kind of threat drive motivation where it can be very um, black and white and very rigid, and very, that you either get it, you're either right or wrong, and things are either working or they're not working. Um, and when you can access and tap into that more balanced approach, it's not about blind optimism of it's okay, everything will be fine. It's okay, even if it all turns to shit. Like, everything's
Yeah,
okay.
I'll be okay and I'll
It'll
solve it.
be okay. Yeah, and it's like,
Yeah,
what happens if this fails? And it's like, well, then
do something different.
we get a different job. Yeah, that,
Yeah.
oh no, what if I'm not making enough money and I start to go bankrupt, and say, well, then you'll look for work. Like, that's
Yeah.
actually
It's that
you can
trust in
solve
self,
problems.
isn't it? It's I can
Mm.
trust myself that I
Yeah.
can try things,
Yeah.
and if they don't work out, I can try something else. One of my favorite things I say to people is that the thing I like most about choice is you
Mm.
can always make another one.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not you don't make the choice and then that's it, right? Well, you're stuck with this till you retire. You've just got to
Mm.
make this one thing work.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that's that thing too, is if you can really target that punitive critic, that's when, no,
yeah.
you've made your choice, you've got to stick with it now.
Yeah.
That when we can tune into our own suffering, as we can notice how to, like, fail quickly if we need to, like how
Yes.
to give yourself permission to step out, and kind of bringing it back to the space that I work in. One of the areas I'm really passionate about is like infant feeding, and mental health, and both breastfeeding support, but also in childhood feeding disorders and things. And I remember, and I think it's a really important skill, is that if we're teaching a child who's got restricted eating, if we're teaching them to eat, the very first thing that I'll teach a child what to do is how to spit things out of their mouth. Because
Yeah.
if we can't trust ourselves to get out of a situation, we're not going to trust ourselves to get into it. And
Yeah.
sometimes the worst thing we can do to unintentionally reinforce fussy eating is to say to a child, like, once you put a green bean in your mouth, you've got to swallow it. If we can give ourselves that permission, if you don't like it, you can spit it out. And
Yeah.
then, yay, you tried a green bean. Well done. And
Yeah.
it's that same thing of giving yourself permission to experiment with life to see if
Yeah.
something works. What if I return to work before I'm ready? Well, then you just cut your hours back. Then,
It's just such a beautiful, gentle approach, isn't it? Like
mm,
we can be gentle with ourselves and we can still get things done that we need to get done.
mm.
We don't have to be, like, say, so punitive around the things that we do.
And
I think
often I
that's
think it's one
beautiful.
of those, the great irony of it is often the more we can give ourselves permission to stop if it's too hard, actually the braver we become,
Yeah.
the easier it becomes to make hard choices. Is if it's okay for you to try something hard, because if it's too hard, you can stop.
Yeah.
Where if we hold ourselves to that, nope, you've made a commitment, you've got to do it, you've got to see it through. Once that green bean's in your mouth, you've got to swallow it. It's going, well, what makes you brave to try a food and to try new things is knowing if at any point it's not okay, you can stop and I'll let you. If it
Yeah.
becomes unbearable, I'll let you stop. And that if we know that we will honor listening when something becomes unbearable, it makes it so much easier to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. My playful side, I'm giggling. My playful side is coming out to say, can we just say as well to everybody, this doesn't just apply to children. Like as adults, we can try new foods, and if we don't like them, we can actually spit them out.
Yeah. 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 It's one of the woman who did the feeding training with me was an American one. I still have in my mind clear as day is she's like, if you don't like it, you can wash it away. And I'm like, that's just my mantra for life now. Like, you can try anything, and if you don't like
Yeah.
it, just wash it away. Just spit it out
Yeah.
and wash it away. It's all right
Yeah.
that you can be bold and brave and try new things. Yeah, and
Yeah.
especially if you give yourself that, if you're confident of knowing I've got an exit plan, like it's all
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely. So you also have diversity in your work, and a lot of people, when I work with other practitioners, I talk about this as something I think can be really, really helpful. Now, not for everybody. Some people like to do the same thing all the time for the whole week. But for many people, I think diversity in your work can be really, really helpful. What do you think that adds to the sustainability and enjoyment of your work life?
Oh, hugely. So, as well as doing individual client work, I really love doing group work and group training, which has been a lot harder over the past few years with the pandemic and
Yeah.
navigating that. But um, I love doing like public education, like public health sort of stuff. And as I said, I worked as a volunteer breastfeeding counselor and loved running peer to peer support groups and doing that kind of group work and breastfeeding education classes and things like that. Um, and my passion for that sort of stuff actually comes from my one of my non-psychology hats, which is I'm a massive comedy nerd. I'm a
Mm.
huge comedy fan, and I actually used to do stand up when I was at uni, and I did debating at school, and I did public speaking and those sorts of things. So I think there's a part of me that actually quite enjoys um, not even so much the performance side of things, but I love stand up. I love writing stand up. I love
Yeah.
thinking about how we put thoughts together and how we communicate. And I love mental health communication
Yeah.
side of things. And so by doing work outside of individual clinical work, it makes a space for me to tap into that part of myself that I enjoy accessing as well, around how can we communicate difficult ideas in really simple concepts. I love the use of analogy and metaphor, and so I liked being able to tap into that, and started Spilt Milk online, and I have quite a big Facebook following.
Yeah.
Not so much on Instagram, but still I'm on Instagram and on Twitter and things like that. And actually, in 2020, I ran a 24-hour live stream for Perinatal Mental Health Week,
Yeah, that was
where
massive effort. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, where I streamed online for 24 hours as part of Perinatal Mental Health Week with a project called Parenting's a 24-hour gig. And it was lovely and it was huge. Um, but as well as doing that, like, it taps into different parts of my needs and being able to service different parts of the community. But it also means that I can build a diary and a calendar that allows me to have that flexibility of how much time I'm working directly in client facing
Yeah.
contact, how much time I'm doing project work. how much time I am thinking about content creation, and building that space, and also being able to tap into different populations. So I really love, um, as I said, that kind of education role. So I love doing supervision with colleagues and supporting them in building their own confidence as well in the space, and doing that health professional um, training,
Yeah.
both within psychologists, but also I do training with like midwives and lactation consultants working in the perinatal space. So it's nice to tap into different parts of the community of the population I work with as well. And so you're getting different clinical presentations and different needs. So it makes it, in terms of sustainability, it's certainly for me, I found it a lot less emotionally draining just by being able to have that gear shift
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
the clinical
Same.
work versus the professional education work, supervision work, um, yeah, online content work. So I
Mm.
love it. I love that diversity.
Yeah. Me too. That for me with my health has been really important, that I'm not doing one-on-one
Mm.
appointments that I have to be at particular times all week. I have a lot
Yeah.
of different things that I do. And it doesn't just have to be in the field of psychology either. As my husband and I have a building company and I design houses. So that for me is completely different to doing psychology. And is tapping into creativity, isn't it? It taps into, like you say, these different needs that we have, but also I think gives you flexibility for life outside of work as well. Because if you're not committed to an appointment time where you're sitting in front of somebody and you know you've got time within your week, you've still got to get the work done, but you've got flexibility. Whereas for you, you might have stuff on with your kids. I was a
Yes.
single mum for 13 years. I've now got an adult son, who, I still parent,
Mm.
but in a different way to when he was a child. And I think having that space and time within your week can be really valuable. So I think I always sort of say to people, this doesn't have to be within the realm of psychology either. It can be
Yeah.
finding something that you're doing that complements the
Yeah.
work that you're doing in psychology as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's one of those things, is that that's still something I'm still working towards, is further diversifying out of just strictly psychology. As I said, I'm a massive comedy nerd, and
Yeah.
one of the upsides that's come out of the pandemic is more online comedy communities and things. And I've actually formed some really firm friendships with some stand-ups in the UK, and actually have a book project in the works with one of those that we say it's book chat, but mostly it's more chat, less book. But we'll get there. We'll sort something out as our lives ebb and flow. Mm.
Yeah. So you are a busy working mum. You have many roles in your life, and you've got lots of skills on board from your training, on how to take care of yourself. But like everybody else, you're also a human being. And I'm just curious as to what are some of your biggest challenges that you face in terms of taking care of yourself across all your roles?
I think that it's absolutely the fact that, as you said, is that I'm not immune. Just because you have all the skills doesn't necessarily make them any easier to use.
Mm.
And sometimes I think the more experience we get in things, what we're doing is we can sometimes just be sharpening the stick with which we poke ourselves. With when it comes to, I know, like in my early psychology training of things like behavioral activation and this and that and the other, and routine setting and all these lovely skills. And you're like, those are great, but that's one of the things that I again love with CFT, is anchoring into that idea of, yeah, you're still a human though,
Yeah.
and you still have all those the same social conditioning as every other human being. You still
Yeah.
have the same um, fears and competing needs as everybody else.
Yeah.
And so, one of the biggest challenges, I guess, like from a practical standpoint, is again, being single parenting makes it difficult to, because my children are still too young for me to leave them at home unattended. So even things like going for a walk, I live right near the bay, and just being able to get out of the house and go for a walk, where previously I might have done that in the morning, gotten up
Yeah.
early, before the kids are even awake, and being able to leave them at home with their dad while I go to the gym or go for a walk. And so I don't have that option anymore.
Yeah.
So having to kind of fit things in, and that's again why we're being able to kind of juggle my schedule a little bit helps. As I also mentioned, I have a history of spinal injuries, and so
Mm.
need to really take care of my body. And
Yeah.
there was I was watching a clip the other day again, comedian, not a psychologist, but was talking about there was something that I thought, gee, that resonates with CFT, with the idea of human suffering, because she sort of says, when I move my body too much, it hurts. When I don't move my body enough, it hurts. When I stand up for too long, it hurts. And when I lie down for too long, it hurts. And when I feel all my feelings, it hurts. And when I don't feel my feelings, it hurts. And this kind of idea and sort of thing. And she sort of was like, I think I've worked out that actually just being in a human body hurts. Like
Yeah.
it hurts. There's and that the only time when it doesn't hurt is when we're in a state of flow and we find
Yeah.
this ability to flow. And she was talking about it in the context of dance, and that for her, she's like, that's the one time I'm not in pain is when I'm dancing.
Yeah.
And being in when we're actually in the moment and being in our body and being in a state of flow. And I think it is that thing of trying to find that and prioritize that within our own lives is what is your state of flow, and when am I most in that state? And for me, it's those little things, like I've bought a very expensive chair that I do my work on, and I have to be constantly aware of my posture, um, needing to find those moments of self care, again, lowering the bar,
Yeah.
of recognizing that um, the way that I fill my little emotional fuel tank is kind of like how I put petrol in the car when I was a uni student. It's just enough to keep the fuel light off. And seriously, the difference though of driving around in a car with the fuel light on all of the time
Mm.
feels really different than if you can just keep that fuel light off, even if you never have a full tank of fuel.
Yeah.
Is I need just enough self-care to keep that fuel light off. And so that's kind of my, again, the bar. I
Yeah.
don't need to be driving around with a constantly full tank of fuel. I don't need to be at a state of
Yeah.
perfect well-being. What I need is to not be in pain. I
Yeah.
need to not be agitated. I need enough time and I need enough sleep to not be agitated, even if I'm not getting a good full night's sleep.
Yeah.
that it's finding those tipping points of what are the non-negotiables. And I think in the parenting space, and juggling it is actually um, allowing my kids to see that too. Like that's
Yeah.
that flow of compassion of others to self, like letting them know when I'm having a hard time going, and letting them have a harder time so that I can have an easier time.
Yeah.
So it is those things like when my kids are at school and I have time to myself, I don't go grocery shopping.
Yeah.
They hate grocery shopping, but I hate grocery shopping. So I'm not going to use my alone time to go grocery shopping.
Yeah.
We can all
Very
hate grocery
wise.
shopping together. Like
If I'm going to suffer, we're all going to suffer.
and it's all right. It's uncomfortable for all of us, but it's unbearable for none of us. It's
Yeah.
okay. And that I can just let them have to go through the discomfort of grocery shopping with me
Yeah.
rather than me bearing that alone so that they don't have to. If that then makes space for me in my day to be able to do half an hour of physio exercises by myself,
Yeah.
or just sit and meditate and have a cup of tea,
Yeah.
or do whatever it is that I need to do while I have that opportunity for stillness.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest challenge is learning how to make other people, like letting other people be uncomfortable
Yes.
so I can be more comfortable.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure there's lots of people listening who will resonate with that, of this discomfort when we start to say, I'm actually going to put my needs first here. And people are just like, oh,
Mm,
but it's a practice, isn't it? It's a practice for all of us, and learning to, or be willing to be with the discomfort that shows up with that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's lovely. Yeah, that's very wise. Make them all go shopping. I was
Yeah.
thinking of you talking before as well about the bar, and I feel like putting it out to everybody to, like, okay, let's all put our bars on the floor.
Yeah.
We'll start from the floor and we'll just pick them up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this learning not to set the bar too high. It's like just set it down on the floor and
Yeah.
lift it a little bit from there, rather than putting it up in the sky and trying to bring it down.
Yes. And it is that thing, is it's that constant. I've got I might talk about it a little bit in a minute. I've got some projects on the go that are all about that, around looking at expectation setting and how do
Yeah.
we be a bit more reasonable in
Yeah.
that, because a lot of times our expectations are so high that even when we think we're lower than we haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would be, and I know this can be hard to distill it down to one piece of advice, but what would one piece of advice be that you'd share with our listeners?
one thing. I think it is like what we were talking about before is the power of flexibility. Like, don't be afraid to um, allow yourself to change your mind,
Yeah.
and that it's okay. It's absolutely okay in everything in life to have a go at something and for it to not work out.
Yeah.
Um, and be that personally, be that professionally, um, anywhere. And that's it was a quote that I used to actually have in my bedroom when I was a kid on my notice board. Is the idea of if you can't make a mistake, you can't make anything.
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
and because I was such a perfectionistic child, and it would be that thing of I would be the kid who didn't want to go sign up to for an art class because what if it turned out badly? And it's like,
Yeah.
of course it's going to. Everything you let yourself be a beginner,
Yeah.
but let yourself make mistakes and realize that that's how we make things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I like that. So I ask this to everybody that comes on. This is one of my favourite questions. If you could meet your 80-year-old self, what do you think she would say to you?
I think she would say, life is long. Life
Life
is
is
really
long.
long. We have so many messages that life is short constantly. And I think I'm a hurrier. Like my natural state is one of busyness. I'm a
Ah,
person who has 3 jobs, who races from and fits things in for everyone. And I come from a busy household and a big family
yeah.
and a culture of hurry and urgency.
Yeah.
And of those, you regret the chances that you don't take, and all of these sorts of ideas. And don't miss your opportunity, don't miss the window. And I think that my 80-year-old self would just say, life is actually really long.
Yeah.
You've got time. Take your time, slow down.
Yeah.
It's okay. And it's all right to do what's right for right now. And I think, again, coming back to the idea of seasons,
Yeah.
like, give yourself time.
Yeah. I think slowing down is one of the most underrated things we have. You know, it is this hurry culture, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think taking time to slow and stop
Yeah.
can be so, so important.
My son talks about birthdays being laps around the sun, like how
Yeah.
many laps around the sun you do. And I think I like that every now and again to sort of stop and think about, in the space of a year, just how far we've come. Like,
Yeah.
if you think about the journey that we're on as humans, and again, coming back to anchoring into that idea of us being this animal on a giant rock that's hurtling through space,
Yeah.
of going, look how far you go, that there's no need to hurry. You've got plenty of time and you travel great distances.
Yeah.
And we often, I think, there's like in business management and things they talk about, we overestimate what we can achieve in a day and we underestimate what we can achieve in a year.
Yeah.
And so just that pacing of life, of reminding ourselves that it's okay. You don't have to hurry things out, because I think that's the thing our red circle threat system does all
Yeah.
the time as well. Hurry, 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 hurry,
Yeah.
hurry. And even our drive system, hurry, 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 hurry,
Yeah.
hurry.
Quick, quick, quick. Get it done. Get it
Quick, quick,
done.
quick, quick, quick.
Be
Get all
productive.
the things now. Yeah. But life
Yeah.
is long. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. So you started to mention projects. Could you tell us a bit about any current projects that you're working on?
Yes. So now they've said life is long. The last 2 years of my life have been very long and very short at the same time. Because I've had, while going through the separation and divorce, lots of projects went on hold for a while. And one of the ones I'm most excited about launching hopefully in the next couple of months or early next year, we'll see what happens with it. But I actually am working on a project that's called The Low Bar.
Yeah.
And about that idea of lowering the bar and expectation setting, and what does it actually mean to
Yeah.
allow ourselves imperfection, and changing that view of that we're all works in progress.
Yeah.
Like, we do have this kind of idea that we're all striving to become better people all of the time. And it's
Yeah.
like, you're actually allowed to take a break from self improvement. You
Yeah.
don't have to, we don't all have to be working towards self actualization as the point at which we can learn to love ourselves. It's like,
Yeah.
just if
Yeah.
you lower the bar, you can just love yourself now. Like, you can actually just.
Absolutely. I interviewed Diana Hill, who's an ACT therapist, on the podcast last season, and she has a new podcast called Life in Process. She wanted to move away from this life in progress
Yeah.
as well. So yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So that's one of the projects I've got on the go is that one. And then I've got another project that's coming that's called Breathing Underwater. And Breathing Underwater is compassion focused therapy in the perinatal space.
Beautiful.
And it's about talking about that idea that when we come into parenthood, oftentimes what parents do is they come into parenting like they're diving underwater and they hold their own breath while they parent. And then their lungs start to burn and their baby goes to sleep for a nap and they come up for air. And they disengage from the task of parenting in order to care for themselves. And they come up gasping and then they dive back in again and they hold their breath while they parent and then they come back up for air. And that when we parent in this way, where our identity and our needs are on the shore and our children are underwater, it starts to make it really unappealing to be in the space of parenting, and parenting can feel like drowning because while you're in it, you aren't breathing for yourself, you aren't meeting your own needs, you aren't noticing or attending to what's going on for you. And so I've developed and shaped up a CFT training around that idea of what do we do so that while you're in it, while you're in the role of parenting, how do you breathe? What is it? And it's different to how you breathe on the shore. It's absolutely very different to be breathing underwater. But that idea of if we can do that, how does that change the sense of urgency? Because so often when I work with families of young babies, there is this urgency of I have to get my baby to sleep. I have to get my baby to play independently. I have to get someone to care for my baby so that I can meet my own needs. I'm waiting for watching the clock, waiting for their partner to get home so that they can do whatever they need to do for themselves. And instead trying to shift and reframe that to being, what would it be like to be okay while you're in it, rather than getting breaks to be okay and go back to being, because we actually inadvertently undermine our maternal identity and our parental identity when we make parenting feel like drowning and the shore feel like an oasis. So that's a big project I've been working on for a good 18 months of really shaping up that content into that perinatal space of making CFT skills workable with a baby.
Amanda, that's so beautiful. I think, gosh, I wish I'd known of you and known of this when I was a single mum with a very little child trying to do uni and all sorts of stuff, because I'm sure I was holding my breath a lot of the time. That sounds absolutely beautiful. So if people want to find out more about you and what you do and get in touch, where can they find you and engage with your work? And I'll put links in the show notes as well.
Yeah, perfect. So lots of my stuff's going through an overhaul at the moment as these projects get ready to launch in the next 6 months. But the easiest place to find me is online, and it's spiltmilkpsych.com. And then on all the socials, it's at spiltmilkpsych, PSYCH. It's all one word. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's where I am, online and around the place.
Wonderful. Amanda, it's been an absolute delight chatting with you, and I'm sure people listening will find so much richness from this and find it so helpful. I really thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's been lovely to talk to you and lovely to catch up too, Hayley.
Lovely. See you soon. Thank you for sharing this time with me today. I hope your time here was helpful and supportive. If there has been something in this episode that you have found helpful, I invite you to share it with another person you think might benefit. I'd also love it if you'd like to leave a review wherever you tune in. Reviews really help to increase awareness of podcasts, meaning I can spread helpful information more widely. All reviews are welcome and much appreciated, as I know they take time out of your day. Music and editing by Nissa Ray. Thanks, Nissa. I wish you all well in your relationship with yourself, and may you go well and go gently.